She should have been running. She should have been screaming. She should have been begging for her life. Instead, she smirked. The jungle's most lethal predator had her cornered, its claws sharp enough to tear through bone, its fangs dripping with the promise of a swift, merciless kill. But when it lunged, when it should have ended her in seconds, she just stood there and whispered three simple words: "You're holding back." The monster froze. It had hunted 1,000 souls. It had never hesitated until now, until her. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. And as she took a slow step forward, golden eyes gleaming, tail flicking like a lazy flame, she smiled. "You poor thing. You don't even realize it yet, do you?" The hunt was never hers to lose, because she was never prey. She was the one playing the game, and now the monster belonged to her. The jungle was alive, not with the soft rustling of leaves or the distant call of creatures, but with something darker, something watching. A presence lurked among the shadows, moving with unnatural grace, its golden eyes glowing like molten fire, sliced through the dense green fog. The air was thick with moisture, damp earth sticking to clawed feet. The beast was hunting, and the jungle held its breath. Then it saw her, a girl. She stood in the clearing, bathed in beams of sunlight that broke through the tangled canopy above. Long golden hair cascaded down her back, her fox-like ears twitching slightly at the sound of movement. A tail, fluffy and golden, swayed behind her absent-mindedly. And the beast, one of the deadliest hunters in the jungle, hesitated. She wasn't running, she wasn't screaming, she wasn't reaching for a weapon. Instead, she simply tilted her head, and then, to the horror of the jungle's apex predator, she smirked. "Well, well," she mused, her voice light, playful. "Aren't you a big one?" The creature stiffened, muscles rippling under its sleek black exoskeleton. It had hunted humans before. They always reacted the same way: fear, panic, desperate, foolish attempts to fight or flee. But this one had the audacity to flirt. The girl took a step forward, unbothered by the massive claws flexing just inches away from her face. Her tail flicked behind her as she inspected the monster, like a cat appraising a particularly curious mouse. Sharp teeth, nice posture, and those eyes. Wow. Ever thought about smiling a little? Might make you less terrifying. The monster flared its nostrils, releasing a deep, guttural growl that made the ground tremble. It was supposed to be a warning. She laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a fearful chuckle, a genuine, amused laugh. Okay, don't get all grumpy on me. I get it. You're the big, scary jungle king," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "I just think you'd be cuter if you weren't constantly trying to murder everything in sight." The monster blinked. It had slaughtered entire villages, left trails of gutted warriors in its wake. Its very presence sent seasoned hunters into a cold sweat. And this girl, she was teasing it. This was not how the hunt was supposed to go. The hunter hesitates. The girl took another step closer, close enough to touch. Her tail flicked playfully, and her fox-like ears twitched as she stared up at the creature like it was some kind of fascinating puzzle. "So, what's the deal with you?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Are you just naturally moody, or has someone broken your heart before?" The monster bared its teeth, a deep, threatening snarl vibrating through its chest. It could end this, right now. A single swipe of its claws would tear through flesh. A single bite would snap bones like twigs. But it didn't. For the first time in its existence, it hesitated. Something about this girl unnerved it. Not because she was stronger, not because she was armed, but because she wasn't afraid. Because something deep in the pit of its mind whispered, "She is not normal." The girl's golden tail swished lazily as she folded her arms, studying the creature like it was a particularly difficult riddle. Then, with the confidence of someone who had never once been prey, she took another step closer. "You're really bad at small talk, huh?" she sighed dramatically. "Guess I'll have to do all the work here." And then she reached out, The monster's instincts screamed. It should kill her. It should move. It should do something. But it just stood there as her fingertips brushed against its armored chest. She grinned. Huh, not as cold as I thought you'd be. The jungle held its breath, and for the first time in its life, so did the monster. The jungle was quiet, too quiet. Every creature that had once lurked in the undergrowth, silent assassins with razor-sharp claws and venomous fangs, had stopped moving. They were watching something they had never seen before. A predator, frozen, a hunter. Not hunting. The girl with fox-like ears and a golden tail had touched the beast, and it had done nothing. She felt the tension in its muscles, the barely contained lethal power beneath its black exoskeleton. But instead of backing away, she tilted her head, curiosity glinting in her sharp, fox-like eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, a playful lilt in her voice. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Or, I don't know, a really attractive woman, and now you don't know what to do with yourself." The monster snarled, baring its razor-like fangs in a last-ditch attempt to regain dominance. It should have killed her by now. It should have ripped her apart before she could mock it like this. But it hadn't, and it didn't know why. The girl exhaled through her nose, her lips pressing into a small, amused smirk. "Wow, you really are just standing there, huh?" She took a slow step back, her tail flicking behind her in an almost taunting manner. The monster tensed, its claws digging into the soil. Its instincts screamed, attack, tear, kill, and yet it did not move. For the first time in its existence, the hunger was gone. The hunter becomes the hunted. She crossed her arms, tapping her fingers against her bare shoulder, pretending to be deep in thought. "Okay, so either I'm secretly the most intimidating thing you've ever seen," she mused, tapping her chin dramatically, "or, oh, no, you like me, don't you?" The monster flinched. It had faced off against warriors armed with plasma rifles. It had slaughtered mercenaries in power armor. It had walked through fire, bullets, and blades. And yet, nothing had ever shaken it the way this woman's teasing voice just did. "It's okay," she continued, voice laced with fake sympathy. "Happens to a lot of people. You see me, you feel the vibes, and bam, instant crush. It's a burden, really." Her golden fox ears twitched as she fought back a laugh. The monster growled, loud and deep, but somehow less murderous than before. She noticed. "Aha! That wasn't a 'I'm going to kill you' growl," she grinned. "That was a 'stop teasing me' growl." The beast let out a short, huffing snarl and took a step forward, towering over her. Its sharp claws curled, the light reflecting off the metallic edges. It could still kill her. But instead of feeling like prey, the girl just raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now you want to act tough again?" she teased, reaching up to flick one of his sharp black horns with her finger. "What's your deal, big guy? You some kind of killing machine who's forgotten how to kill?" The monster stiffened. Her words should not have meant anything. And yet, deep inside its hollow chest, they did. It had been a killing machine, a perfect predator, a mindless instrument of destruction designed only to hunt. But right now, it felt something else. The girl grinned up at him, sharp and daring. "Guess that means I win, huh?" The jungle watched in silence. The hunter had become the hunted. The air between them was thick with something unspoken. Tension, curiosity, something darker. The jungle's usual hum, chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant cries of unseen creatures, had vanished, as if nature itself was too stunned to breathe. The monster's glowing eyes locked onto hers, its clawed hands twitching at its sides. It should have killed her. It had every opportunity. And yet, here she was, smirking. "You're not very good at this, huh?" she mused, crossing her arms over her chest. "I mean, don't get me wrong, you've got the whole intimidating death machine aesthetic going for you, but the execution? Sloppy. A real hunter wouldn't hesitate." The monster's throat rumbled. a growl reverberating so deep she felt it in her bones. It wasn't amused. She was. Her tail flicked behind her lazily, like she had already won. "What's stopping you?" she challenged, tilting her head. "Go on then. Do it. Tear me apart." She spread her arms slightly, welcoming the kill. The monster didn't move. She grinned. "That's what I thought." The moment that changed everything. She took a step closer, slow and deliberate, watching it flinch. This thing, this perfect predator, flinched. "Oh, you are fun," she murmured, voice dripping with amusement. The monster's claws clenched, knuckles cracking under the pressure. It wasn't supposed to feel hesitation. It wasn't supposed to feel anything. So why did its chest tighten like this? Why did its instincts tell it to run, rather than kill? Her golden ears perked up, picking up on the subtle shift in its stance. Fear, not hers, his. "Oh," she whispered, realization dawning in her eyes. "You're afraid of me." It snapped. With a roar that shook the trees, the monster lunged. Claws raised, teeth bared, all hesitation shattered in an instant. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't run. And just before those razor-sharp claws could meet her flesh, she smiled. "Took you long enough." The monster's claws stopped just inches from her throat. Its body froze mid-strike. Muscles locked as if an unseen force had shackled it in place. She hadn't moved. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't even blinked. Instead, she stood there, staring up at the beast with an expression that made its insides twist in ways it didn't understand. Mockery, amusement, a complete and utter lack of fear. Her golden tail flicked behind her, slow, deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. "Huh," she said, voice light. "That was almost impressive. Almost." The monster snarled, baring its jagged fangs. It had lunged with full intent to kill, so why hadn't it followed through? Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. She tilted her head, watching the internal battle play out in the beast's glowing, molten eyes. "This is new for you, isn't it?" she mused. "That hesitation, that feeling." The monster flinched. She saw it, and she laughed. A soft, melodic sound, so out of place in this brutal jungle that it sent a shiver through the air. "Oh my God," she gasped between chuckles. "You hate this, don't you?" The monster snapped its jaw shut with a loud clack, as if trying to suppress whatever alien instinct was clawing at its insides. But she wasn't wrong. It hated this. It hated her, because she was breaking something inside it, something that had never been broken before. The hunter becomes the hunted. The girl took a step closer, invading the beast's personal space like she didn't care it could rip her apart at any second. "You're a killer," she murmured, golden eyes studying its rigid frame. "A perfect, bloodthirsty hunter. No remorse, no mercy, just teeth and claws and instinct." She reached up slowly, deliberately, until her fingertips ghosted over its armored chest. It didn't move. It didn't stop her. "And yet," she mused, voice barely above a whisper, "you can't kill me." A muscle twitched in the monster's jaw. It wanted to deny it. It wanted to prove her wrong, but it couldn't. She grinned. "Face it, big guy," she purred, tail curling behind her like a satisfied feline. "You're losing this game." The monster growled low, deep in its throat, but the sound lacked its usual killing intent. She leaned in slightly, golden ears flicking forward. "And the worst part," she whispered, "you don't even know what game you're playing yet." The jungle held its breath, and for the first time in its existence, so did the monster. The jungle was silent. Not the kind of silence that came when a predator stalked its prey, but something deeper, more unnatural. The monster could feel it, a shift in the air, an invisible force pressing against its chest, making its claws feel too heavy to lift. And the girl? She just stood there, not running, not flinching, not screaming, just watching, that damn smirk still playing on her lips. "You're trying really hard not to freak out, huh?" she murmured, golden eyes glinting like sharpened knives. The monster growled, a low, guttural sound that usually sent prey bolting for their lives. She didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head and did something that shouldn't have been possible. She laughed, not a nervous, trembling chuckle, a real, amused, almost pitying laugh. The sound sent a ripple of unease down the monster's spine. "You don't get it yet," she mused, her tail flicking lazily behind her. "You're not hunting me anymore." The beast snarled, taking a heavy step forward. The metal plating on its claws gleamed under the dappled light of the jungle canopy, a sharp reminder of the violence it was built for. But she didn't back away. She leaned in. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely loud enough to be heard over the jungle's eerie stillness. "I'm hunting you." The predator who didn't know how to be prey. The words lodged themselves deep in the monster's mind, a foreign concept so absurd it should have infuriated it. Instead, it felt something else, something it had never known before: doubt. The girl took another step forward, deliberately slow, watching it tense. "What's wrong?" she teased. "Heart beating too fast? Hands getting a little shaky?" The monster hated this. It had spent its entire existence ruling these lands, a king among predators. But right now, with her golden eyes locked onto it like she was the one in control, it felt like prey. She sighed dramatically, hands resting on her hips. "Honestly, I thought you'd be more fun," she admitted. "All that muscle, all those teeth, and yet here you are, frozen like a scared little cub." The beast snapped. With a roar that shook the treetops, it lunged. This time, there was no hesitation, no second guessing, no invisible chains holding it back. It was going to end this now. But at the last possible second, she moved. Not away, not to dodge. She stepped into the attack, and just before its claws could rip into her skin, she smiled. "Took you long enough." The tables have turned. Or have they? She wasn't afraid, and that terrified the monster more than anything ever had. The jungle trembled with the force of the monster's lunge. Trees swayed, leaves shuddered, and the very ground beneath them quaked under the weight of its fury. And yet it missed. Not because she dodged, not because she ran, because she stepped forward, into the attack, like she was inviting it, like she wanted it. The beast's razor-sharp claws barely grazed her skin before she twisted, smooth, fluid, like a whisper of wind against a blade. Too fast, too controlled. The monster's body lurched past her, forced into a movement it hadn't expected. She hadn't fought back. She hadn't overpowered it. She had simply let it destroy itself. "Yikes," she said, her voice carrying that same infuriating playfulness. "That was clumsy." The monster dug its claws into the dirt, twisting around, snarling. This wasn't possible. This wasn't how prey was supposed to act. She should have screamed. She should have begged. She should have died. Instead, she flicked her damn tail at it, golden fur shimmering under the faint light. "You're really bad at this," she mused, tapping her chin. "How have you survived this long?" The monster roared, a deafening primal sound that shattered the silence of the jungle, a final warning. But she just grinned. The look that changed everything. The beast tensed, waiting for her to move, to run, to fight, to react. She did none of those things. Instead, she simply looked at it, not with fear, not with anger, but with something else, something that made the monster's chest tighten in a way it didn't understand. Pity. "You're not used to losing, are you?" she murmured. The words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they were too right. The beast had never lost. It had never been outmatched, never been challenged in a way that made it question itself. Yet now, standing before this strange girl with fox-like ears and an infuriating smirk, it felt like the weak one, like it was the one being hunted, and for the first time in its existence, it didn't know what to do. "Don't worry," she added, stepping even closer, so close that she had to tilt her head up to meet its gaze. I'll teach you how it feels." The jungle held its breath, and for the first time, so did the monster. The jungle had never been this quiet before. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The monster's claws twitched at its sides, still coated in dirt from where it had dug into the earth to stop itself. The scent of the jungle, damp, raw, alive, felt almost distant now, drowned out by the pounding in its own head. It was waiting for her to move, for her to fight, for her to run. But she didn't. Instead, she just stood there, watching. Those golden eyes flickered with something it didn't understand. Pity, curiosity, or something worse. A slow, easy smile played on her lips, and that was somehow more terrifying than if she had been screaming. "You don't even know what you are, do you?" she mused, voice light, teasing. The monster growled, the sound raw and primal. It knew exactly what it was. A hunter, a killer, a machine made for destruction. But when she took another step forward, her tail flicking behind her like an afterthought, it stepped back. It stepped back. The realization sent a cold jolt through its body, but she just laughed softly. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Her fingers ghosted over its armored chest again, tracing the deep grooves in its exoskeleton like she was reading it. "You're so used to tearing things apart," she murmured. "But have you ever asked yourself, why?" The beast tensed, claws curling into tight fists. It didn't need a reason. It had never needed a reason. It simply was. Kill, survive, dominate. That was all it had ever known. But now there was doubt, and it hated that she had put it there. She sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "This is getting sad," she said. "Here I thought you'd be some unstoppable nightmare, and now look at you, having an existential crisis over a little banter." The monster snarled, but it felt empty, like it was just going through the motions. She noticed. "Oh, don't get all moody on me," she teased. "If it makes you feel any better, I think you're kinda cute when you're confused." The words sent a strange pulse through the beast's mind, something it immediately rejected. This was wrong. It had never hesitated before. It had never let prey get inside its head like this. And yet here she was, smiling at it like she had already won. She took another step closer. This time it didn't step back. She grinned. "See? Progress." The jungle remained silent. For the first time in its existence, the monster didn't know what came next. The air was thick, heavy with something unspoken. The jungle still watched. The monster still waited. And she, the girl with the golden tail and the fearless grin, still refused to back down. There was something wrong with this moment. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The monster had lunged. It had intended to kill her. And yet here they were, standing mere inches apart, not as predator and prey, but as something else entirely. She tilted her head, fox-like ears flicking forward, reading the hesitation in its stance, in the tension of its shoulders. "You're still holding back." The monster flinched, her tail curled behind her, slow, deliberate, playful. "You know what that means, right?" she continued, voice smooth, teasing. She lifted a hand, slowly this time, giving it every opportunity to stop her. It didn't. Her fingertips brushed against its jaw, trailing along the edges of the jagged exoskeleton. It didn't move. "It means I win." The monster's breath came slow, heavy. It could hear its own heartbeat now, something it had never noticed before, because it had never needed to. Before her, there was only instinct. Before her, there was only the hunt. Now, there was something else. Something it didn't understand. Something it didn't want to understand. But it was too late. She had already won. Her golden eyes flickered in the dim light. "So what happens now?" she asked, grinning. "Are you going to pretend you're still the scary, unstoppable nightmare? Or are you finally going to admit that you've got no clue what to do with me?" The beast stared. This wasn't a fight. It had never been a fight. It was a game, and she had been playing it from the moment she laid eyes on it. A sharp breath rattled in its chest. Then finally, it stepped aside, Not in retreat, not in defeat, but because it chose to. Her smile widened. Took you long enough. The jungle exhaled, the tension breaking like a snapped wire. And just like that, the hunt was over. But for the first time in its existence, the monster wasn't sure if it wanted it to be. The jungle was silent once more. The predator had made its choice. It didn't kill her. It couldn't. And deep down it knew. It never would. She had played the game, and she had won. But as she walked away, golden tail swaying behind her, she paused, just for a moment, a glance over her shoulder, a flicker of mischief in her eyes. "You're going to follow me, aren't you?" The monster didn't answer. It didn't need to, because the truth had already settled between them, unspoken, undeniable. She wasn't running, and it wasn't hunting, not anymore. The game had changed, but the hunt never truly ends.